trying to improve.
You're doing good. All right, we're ready.
Call the meeting to order. At this time, I ask that, Bev, would you give our invocation, please?
Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. We ask, God, that you would just be with us, give us wisdom, help us to know which direction to go. We ask, Father, that you would bless each and every one within the four walls of this building. We ask, Father, that you would just speak to our hearts, speak to our minds, and give us good reasoning, good logic. Help us to do your will. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Stand and join me in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, please.
Goodman,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Rowe,
Here.
Barker,
Here.
Drennan,
Here.
Hernandez,
Here.
Sacks,
Here.
Okay, citizen comments. Guys, we'll have 3 minutes, and I'll try to tell you if it's once you get to 2.5 minutes, just so you know, not trying to be rude, just so you know if you got something you want to be sure to get out, that you have that, can get it out in that last 30 seconds, if that's okay. Devin Harold.
I mainly got questions. I'm hearing that we're going to be raising our water bill and our electric bill like $40-50.
Sir, if you'll come by City Hall, I can review all those rates with you in the
Okay, well, I'm not done.
Okay.
Okay. I took my wife to the hospital right out here, second week of June. Chest pains, heart attack. They put us in the back lobby at the hospital. No one ever come out and checked on us. Nobody checked with a stethoscope, listened to her, never nothing. We sat there for an hour and 15 minutes. I took her home. Lindsay came and picked her up. Took her to Oklahoma City and she'd had a heart attack. This is unacceptable. I don't know what you guys can do, but I definitely want to make a formal complaint in front of all of you. Okay, the next thing, behind my house, 925 Cherokee Place, there's an alley. I know the police have talked about it with you guys. You can't drive down the alley. Somebody's cut all the trees down, or a bunch of the trees down, and they're laying there. Okay, that is an emergency access. They can't even get down there and read the gas meters. I mean, there's piles of trees. I drove over top of them yesterday. I was looking for my dog. And that needs to be cleaned up. That's been 5-6 years ago. And you can't comment on what's going on with the water prices.
Let me just,
You know, I'm not trying to be a pain in the
no,
butt. I just can't
I'll
come
give
to
you one of
everybody.
these. I've got some of these to pass out for you. That's our rate structure, and you can look at that. Then call City Hall and schedule a time with me to visit, and I'll define how those are being addressed.
Okay, good. I cannot afford another 30, 40, whatever it is. I'll have to stop my trash. I don't know what else to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Billy Nye.
I just have some questions on the land sale. You guys voted last meeting to surplus that. Is that gonna be appraised for the amount that it's worth? Is that gonna be the minimum bid? I mean, I can see that land being enough to catch Lindsay up on its bills. Cause I see right now there's 7 acres for sale north of town, that's $40,000. We got over 300 acres up there. That land needs to be appraised, not just set for somebody to sell it, you know. There's enough land there to make enough money to catch this town up. I mean, if you stop looking at it,
That land is gonna be appraised.
And will that be the minimum bid?
That'll be, it'll be a sealed bid process.
Well, I don't
And the
like that,
council-
because the last surplus sale you guys had, I went to look at the stuff you had for surplus sale, and over half of it wasn't even there. I don't know if it got dispersed out through the
Yeah, I
the
don't know.
employees or what before the sale, but over half of the items were not on that list, were not there.
This is a one.
I know, but I'm saying, I don't think it's right for it to be a good old boy sale,
Being
because it
sealed
butts
bid.
up to a lot of the, I know it's sealed bid, but you still have to look at the sealed bids. And I got one more question.
They will be-
I ran for city council, and you have to live in the city to be on the city council, correct? The last city manager we had didn't live in town, and I see on here you're gonna hire a new city manager. Are they gonna be required to live in city limits? Because if not, you're gonna run into the same stuff you ran into last time. People complaining about, oh, they don't live here. I mean, if it's a requirement for city council, I would expect it to be a requirement for city manager too. Am I not right? I'm right. So, just, that's all I wanted to ask about. The land sale needs to be appraised and sold for what it's worth, not just sold because
I don't make
they're a good old
deals.
boy, you know, and we're buddies with them. But I know that's how things go, so I would like to see the appraisal made public so we know what the minimum bid is. There needs to be a minimum
In the bid
bid,
notice, there will be a minimum bid.
but it needs to be the appraisal, not half of what it's appraised for.
And
Because the
nobody has
land
any
is
intent-
outrageous.
Nobody has any intent of doing that. That would be.
I know they don't, but it happens, and
I'm
I
sorry.
wanted to bring that up. And like I said, as far as the hiring, you're gonna run into the same mess you ran into last time, with people complaining because they don't live here or whatever. If I have to live here to be there, I need to live here to be there, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is consent agenda. And first is approval of minutes. The following items we need to,
I'm gonna make a motion to approve the consent agenda as
Uh.
presented, except for the financial reports. We'll be out since property just talk about it.
okay, second,
Second,
first, second, motion and second, roll call.
Staggs,
yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Brennan,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes,
Inman.
Yes. Okay. The approval of minutes.
Consider Jim's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you got you. Okay, we're down to financial reports, so we're very good.
I'm gonna pass something out, and over here, start it, and everybody take a copy and send it around.
If you would identify yourself, we know, but
Sure.
I want these people in here to know.
I'm Frank Crawford with Crawford and Associates, and Deanne, who's been here, over the last several weeks and months. We've been working on kind of updating the financials, trying to get everything caught up and keep cash flows positive as we're going on. One of the things I think, that I heard, when we were last talking was, didn't have a real good feel, at least council-wise, about where we are each month. And so I'm trying to devise something that's simple, that doesn't have hundreds of numbers running across the page everywhere, to try to give you an idea of what I think you need to keep focused on, big picture-wise, as far as finance is concerned. And this is a form that I've kind of designed, and I'm gonna walk you through it. Basically, it's one page per fund, but since we have about 17 funds, I didn't want to overwhelm you with 17 pages, but instead I've taken the three biggest funds that we have, where 90% of our activity is flushing through. And if we can keep track of what's happening there every month, I think that gives you a good idea of what's happening overall. And so I'm gonna kind of go through these 3 pages and walk you through, and then just listen to me, listen to your feedback to see if this makes sense. And if it doesn't, or if you'd rather see something else, or kind of testing out here a little bit of a theory to keep you guys understanding what's happening big picture wise from finance, and then what to do if you have questions that would allow us to drill down deeper. In other words, we're going to start at a 30,000 foot level, and if everything looks good at the 30,000 foot level, then you might not feel the need to ask questions at a 20,000 foot level. But if something looks odd at the top, then we have the ability to drill down all the way down to individual line items if we want to. But again, those reports are 200-300 pages long if we wanted to print them out for everybody, and they become a little bit overwhelming. So let me walk you through what we've came up with here and see if this makes a little bit of sense. So the first page is the general fund. If you remember last time we were talking about it like a bad fashionable pair of pants with 17 different pockets. We got two really big pockets where the bulk of the money is. General fund is one of those pockets. That's where the bulk of our tax revenues go or grant revenues go. And out of that fund comes most of our governmental expenditures: police, fire, streets, EMS, parks, finance, all of that stuff. So that fund basically is kind of designed typically to pay for the governmental services. And so you notice that there are two columns here under the general fund. There's a budget column and an actual column. The budget column is basically the budget that you adopted a month or so ago in late June, mid-June, for the general fund, and basically shows what are we starting with at the top, what our revenues are for the entire year, what the expenses are budgeted to be for the entire year, and then what would be left over. And then how much of a percentage is that of our annual revenues? In other words, if we calculate what our fund balance or our reserves are. If you remember, we talked last time that we don't really know what the general fund began the budget year with that you just started, because we're still trying to catch up even 21 and 22 numbers. So I've left that at zero, where you basically see we don't have a beginning number. We basically are just estimating the budgetary beginning fund balance at zero. It might be better than that, it might be worse than that by the time we're done. That could be a negative number at the end of the day. We just don't know yet. But what this form is designed to do is make you focus on the next two numbers, the revenues and the expenses. And so if you look at the way the revenues and expenses are played out here, it basically says you budgeted in the general fund that you were going to collect or earn $2.5 million of revenue. Then the next line says we were going to spend $3.5 million, which basically says, ouch, we're going to spend $1 million more than what we earn. However, remember, we also get subsidies from other funds like the LPWA, the Emergency 1 Cent Sales Tax Fund. They send us $1 million. And so basically, when you do the math, this nets to zero. In other words, we're going to collect, we estimated that you would collect $2.5 million of revenue and $1 million of transfers from other funds, and that was what was going to fund your $3.5 million in expense. That means we had no increase or decrease to fund balance, and then when we add that zero increase or decrease to our beginning number, which is also zero, 0 plus 0 is 0, so we don't have an ending fund balance. We should have an ending fund balance. We want to keep somewhere between 10 to 30% of our revenue stream in a reserve capacity. And so right now, we didn't have any information, and you didn't have any information to allow you to calculate that, because we don't really know the beginning number of where the general fund is starting. So forget the beginning and ending number and focus more on what's happening on a monthly basis. We've had 1 month of the year occur so far. That's 1/12 of the year. As a percentage, it's 8.33%. If you were to live in a perfect world where all the revenues come in exactly 1/12 of a year every month, and we spend exactly 1/12, then this would be easy to track because the math would be pretty simple. But that's not how it always happens. Some months we collect more money, some months we spend more money, and so we're going to basically try and track this versus the actual results versus what we think should have occurred. And so that way you see that second column with all the actual numbers in it, and then you see a percentage over here, which we think ought to be somewhere around 8.33% if you hold everything constant. If it's not that, I've written these little text boxes around here that kind of explain everything. And so we've kind of went through the budget column, and if you looked at each of those three text boxes on the budget column, it basically reiterates what I said. You know, we're planning for no increase or decrease in fund balance. We're hoping just to break even, that we spend the same amount that we collect. So what's happened in 1 month? So in 1 month, the general fund collected $234,074. That's about 9%. So we're a little bit ahead revenue collection for this month. Probably the sales tax check was a little bit bigger than what we'd estimated. That's the bulk of what that revenue is. So that's great. We spent $265,000. That's only 7%. And so basically, if you collect $234 and you spend $265, we only created a $31,000 hole just based on the revenues and expenses. But remember, we haven't counted the transfers yet. And so on the next line, we see that the general fund received $150,000. Basically, that was a transfer from the emergency 1 cent tax fund. And it sent out transfers of $44,000, so that they had net transfers of $106. Well, basically, if you do the math and you run the table here, that means we've increased our beginning fund balance, whatever that number was, by $74,000, almost $75,000. That's great. I wish that would happen every month, because we make $75,000 every month. I can pretty much predict what 12 months of that would be, but that isn't the way it's going to work. But right now, we have $74,000, a little over $74,000 of extra revenue, and we have about $4,400 of encumbrances. What encumbrances are things that we've ordered, but the bill hasn't came in yet. So it's waiting for the bill to come. And we're waiting for the good to come also, the goods or services to come. And so in the general fund, if we end our fund balance, if we assume the beginning was 0, we have about $70,462 left over of fund balance. That's about 2% of your annual revenue stream, which is a great start, but again, we're 1 month in. The general fund only looks this good basically because we sent $150,000 from the emergency 1 cent sales tax. If you take that out, if you didn't transfer any money from the emergency 1 cent sales tax fund, this would be in the hole again at the end of the day. And so that's the general fund. And again, I know it's hard to look at this without looking at all 17 pockets at the same time, but.
Let me ask you.
Sure.
We're still don't know where we started. We may be negative, we may be positive where we started from, right?
That's a great point, because although 74,000 or 70,000 at the end of this month might look good, it wouldn't look good if I had a negative 1 million in the beginning number. Then all that would mean is it's now a negative 925,000. Still better than it was, but wow, that's a big hole.
And I know this probably, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Do you know guesstimation when we might get to that point, knowing?
I think we're pretty close to being able to get 21 audited soon. 21 cash has been reconciled. I think the journal entries have been made. I think we're pretty close, but we're really not focusing on 21 because right now our time is focused on what's happening today. We're trying to make sure that employees still get paid on time and that the vendors get paid without us writing checks that can't be cashed. And so a lot of our time is really now, especially with the amount of turnover we've had just in the last 6 weeks in finance. I think we're down 5 people. We've had 5 different people turn over. And so Deanne is here literally every day, or working on this every day, just trying to ensure that all the AP gets entered in, all the payroll gets generated, all the vendors get paid, all the cash balances are still positive. And so we're really kind of almost pushed to the back burner, catching a lot of that.
I totally understand. You totally understand why I want to know.
Absolutely. Well,
I'm not griping.
No. I think it's really tough for you guys to make a lot of decisions without knowing where we're at. And I can't tell you where we're at because I don't know where we started yet. And so we're going to get there. It's just going to take us a while to get there.
I appreciate that. I just, I'm not complaining.
Sure.
I guess kind of it doesn't do any good. I understand.
But ultimately, once we get that number figured out and we get the June 30, 22 number, I'll be able to go into that first line on both the budget and the actual and type in a real number. Then this equation will be complete we'll know the depth of the hole that we might have dug, and we'll be able to figure this out a little bit better. But for right now, all I really want to teach you guys to focus on is what's going on in the middle. In other words, what are our revenue streams and what are our expense streams, and are the percentages out of whack anywhere? And so that's the general fund. Now flip the page and let's look at the emergency 1 cent sales tax fund. This one's a little bit different, where we actually can kind of predict what the fund balance was, because this isn't really an operating fund. This is a fund where we stick that 1 cent that's restricted for certain things, and then we only pull the money out of it when we're trying to pay for something, either in this fund or to reimburse another fund for it. And so we started with about 280,000. You can see that number. And again, we'll start at the budget column. The revenues here are not very much. It's probably a little bit of interest income, $1,500 of revenue. The bulk of this, basically, this fund exists with transfers of the sales tax. The 1 cent that we collect in the general fund, we transfer it over. That's the 700,000. And then the 500,000 that we transfer out to reimburse the general fund or the LPWA for some of those restricted expenditures that they pay. So regardless, if you look at the math, we're starting with about 280,000. After you do all the numbers, you're going to increase your fund balance by another 200,000, meaning that technically you'll have about 481,000 to spend in that fund at the end of this year if the budget works the way it's supposed to. If you collect every penny that you're going to collect, which is 1,500 and 700,000, and you spend every penny that you say you're going to spend, which is 500,000, that fund's going to grow from 280 to 481. I don't really care about the percentages of revenue, because this is a special fund. It's not really designed to accumulate a lot of money. It's designed to collect the money that's restricted and then to monitor that it's being spent for restricted purposes. And so whether you have fund balance there or not is not terribly important. So it's not an operating fund. But let's look at what's actually happened here in the actual column. So we had collected revenues of $73. That's 5%. Again, kind of not our 8% number, but we're only dealing with a $1,500 number for the whole year. We really want to focus on the transfers. So we had transfers in of 68,104, which was 10%, meaning that that's probably the sales tax penny that's coming over, and it must have ran a little high. That's why it's 10%. But notice what we did on the transfer out. We transferred out 150,000 in 1 month. That's not 8%, is it? That's 30%. But if we wouldn't have transferred that 150 out over to the general fund wouldn't have looked as profitable as it did. So again, I hate to say it, it's kind of a shell game. We're moving money around in pockets right now, but at the end of the day, once I shake all the money out, it's the same amount of money that was there to begin with, just in a different pocket. And so the first thing I would ask here is, well, is this unusual? Are we going to need to send $150,000 every month out of this fund? Because we're going to bust that $500,000 budget in about the 4th month, right? So that can't sustain itself, meaning that the general fund's either got to bring in other revenues or cut back its expenses, because it can't take $150,000 out of this fund every month. We've only budgeted to do $500,000. We've already ate 30% of it. We're 1 month in. So if you keep following the math, this fund started with 279, right? And then we decreased our fund balance by 80,000 by sending out more money than we collected. So now we've reduced this fund's fund balance to 198,000. So in reality, even though the budget said we were going to make this fund bigger, what have we done? We've made it go down, right? And you can isolate why it went down, because of one thing. That transfer that we had to send to the general fund in order to reimburse the general fund for those expenses, and send a little bit more because the general fund wouldn't have had any fund balance. And you can't operate a checking account with no money in it. I mean, we all don't deposit exactly what we need to write checks out of. We always have carryover, right, to float ourselves for different purposes. So this is a fund that we're going to have to watch very closely, because although this fund existed and it's there for us to draw upon when we need it, It doesn't have unlimited resources. And that's why we budgeted 700,000 in and 500 out so that we could continue to increase those numbers. But at this pace, that's not going to happen. And so, again, you can kind of see how those are intertwined. Third fund, let's go look at the third big fund, which is the LPWA. This is the fund where all the utilities are ran out of. No tax support at all. We transfer money from the general fund over because I think there's a quarter penny that we transfer over from sales tax purposes that was voted as a subsidy, if you will, to help that LPWA with debt service. So even though technically there's no tax revenue going over, I guess you could say that there's a quarter penny of support. But the bulk of this fund is ran by its utility revenue and the costs of running the utilities. So let's do the same analysis. Let's look at the budget. The budget says we are going to estimate almost roughly 6.7 million of revenue. That's, again, if you wanted to know what that revenue was, I could tell you how much is electric, how much is water, how much is sewer, and how much is sanitation. But again, you may not need to know that right now. That's why I don't have that much detail on the support. The expenses of operating that system, a little over 5 million, 5,030,000. So immediately we look and we see, aha, our revenues are going to be 1.6 million more than what we spend out of this fund. However, we also have to send money out of this fund to subsidize some of the other funds. So that's why you see that transfer out for 525,000. I think the bulk of that goes to, if not all of it, goes to the general fund to help it with its expenses. And so even with that factored in, we're looking to, budget-wise, to increase fund balance by 1.1 million. Well, again, I don't know what that beginning balance is. If it was zero, this column looks great because we're basically saying, hey, if everything goes to plan, we're going to have $1.1 million or $1.126 in extra cash in theory. But that's not really the way it works, because chances are that beginning fund balance is negative. Let's say it's $1.126 million negative. Now what happens? This fund is barely breaking even, correct? Because right now we're projecting an excess, but I don't know how big or deep that hole is at the beginning. But again, we're not going to worry about beginning and ending right now. We're focusing on what's going on in the month, so let's go to the actual column. So in 1 month of revenue, we have 640,000. Is that good or bad? That's good, right? It should be 8.33%. It's somewhere around 10. Our expenses were 420, a little over 420,000, almost 421. That's roughly right on target. So that produced a $219,000 excess revenue stream for that month. That means we've increased our fund balance, whatever that number begins with, by that $219,000. We have about $6,700 of encumbrances, goods that we've ordered that haven't come in yet. And that still leaves us with about $212. However, let's think about this for a little bit. Notice that we didn't transfer any money to the general fund, did we? Even if we would have sent some support over to the general fund, all it would have done would make the general fund look a little better and make this one look a little worse, right? So don't be fooled by the interactivity of the pockets of our ugly pair of pants. There's still the same amount of money. What I want to caution you about here is I would expect June, July, August months of utilities to be not normal, to be higher than normal. Dry summer, hot summer, that generates electric revenue, it generates water revenue at a pace that usually exceeds what you're going to get in electric and water in January, February, and March or December. So you're going to have 3 months of really good profit. This is probably one of them, but I think you're going to have some bad months where the expenses are going to overwhelm some of this revenue. So it's impossible to kind of look at 1 month as a whole. So next month when we come, what you'll see is my percentages will change to 16.5%, 8.33 times 2, right? And then we'll be measuring how the revenues are after 2 of the 12 months. And we'll just keep rolling this schedule forward so that at any point in time when any of these percentages get way out of whack and we're halfway through the year, that's usually a red flag that says, hey, wait a second, we've only got a half year to address this. So right now, everything might be a little bit out of whack just because we're 1 month in, but the more months we accumulate, the closer these numbers ought to be to what's actually happening. So, I guess what I'm wanting to know is, does this make more sense than what you used to get before? I mean, if we were to prepare this report every month where these three funds, you can kind of look around and see what's going on, does that make sense? And then, of course, these text boxes that I use over here, sometimes I'll type why the percentages are off. Like, if something's way out of whack, I'll type, hey, the reason for this is because of blank. You know, we had to pay a $450,000 power bill this month, and that was for power a month ago, and we don't collect that until another month forward. In other words, there's usually a reason for why the percentages don't work, and that's what those text boxes are for. So, again, you could do this 17 different times and look at all the funds, but those other funds are minor compared to this. You're still capturing 90% of the activity here. So, again, all I guess I'm wanting to stress is, first of all, if that's a form that you understand, and if you'd like to see this, and we'll just make sure that it doesn't take very much time to prepare this. What it does take a lot of time to do is to get to the point where I can prepare this. If Deanne doesn't do what she needs to do, I don't have the numbers to get here. But the actual filling out of these numbers are the 1% of the work, and the 99% of the work is what goes in behind all of this. So, you know, we're I don't want to make it sound like we're out of the woods, because we are clearly not out of the woods. I don't really have a good idea of how deep the hole is. But, you know, we talked about $1 million, $1.5 million roughly that we might be in the hole to start. So if you were to take let's say $1.5 million and spread this out at the beginning, these sheets don't look very good at the end of the day, even though this month looked okay. But we expected this month to look okay. So all that's really happening is kind of what we expected. Nothing better, nothing worse. We still have to monitor the cash balances of every one of your bank accounts every day, every week. I think it's looked at closely just to make sure that we're either transferring the right amount of money that we need to reimburse all the funds for their appropriate expense, and then make sure that everybody gets paid on time and that the vendors get paid on time also. We're actually using some of this excess cash that you're generating to pay for stuff for 3 different fiscal years. In other words, we're still finding accounts payable that never got entered into the system because they're just stacks of invoices of old bills that never got entered into the system. So all that you've been approving AP-wise, when you see these checks that you approve on a checklist, that's just the checks that are to be paid. That's not all of the list of expense. That's just what got entered into the system. So there are still things that are being entered into the system every month that don't relate to this month. They relate to 4 months ago. A bill that we hadn't paid to a vendor that might be 3 or 4 months old. And so we're having to catch all that up. And right now, we're making sure that we have enough cash to do that. But at some point in time, you literally might run out of cash that you can use. And there's only 2 or 3 things that you can do to generate cash. Bring in more money or spend less. I said 3, but there's really only 2.
Any questions for him? And I understand exactly where you're at, but you're in a bad position, and we're probably in a worse position. Because citizens want to know, and I want to know, but we really, and I understand you can't tell us, but wouldn't you agree with that statement? Basically, we're both in bad positions.
I would say that we're in unfamiliar territory.
There you go.
We don't know what we don't know. But we've now, I think, got a system in place where we can keep the months that we have now current. In other words, but again, that's with Deanne spending the bulk of the week here, which doesn't need to sustain itself. We eventually have to get people in on a day-to-day basis, employees within the finance that will do much of what she does, and then get us back to the oversight role where we look at this just to make sure nothing sticks out weird to us. But right now we're still focusing on 3 different fronts: current stuff, projecting forward future stuff, and then looking back to catch up on the 3rd front.
So that 3rd one normally is not.
No, in fact, we should never be more than 6 months behind. Your
And
audits?
I understand, I'm not, that's not your fault, I'm not saying that, but I want everybody to understand, it's just a tough position for everybody because of that.
We got quite a bit behind, city got behind in record keeping, and it's just taken a while to get it caught back up. I mean, that's
I'd say
the
wait.
simplest explanation. Yeah, way behind.
Frankie,
Yes.
Frankie,
Oh, sorry.
I need to reiterate to them too that the reserve funds are on, and now they're basically paycheck, paycheck.
Sure. You know, one of the things we talked about last time, one of the steps that I was wanting to get you back to financial respectability, one of the steps was that we need to examine which bank accounts that you have that have money in it that normally would be restricted, but because we've already bought things that are restricted and never reimbursed it, could we use? And so in the past 3 or 4 months, we've identified a number of those funds where we could take the money out of the street and alley account and use it to pay for all the street expenditures that the general fund had already been incurring. That's a one-time fix, and most of that reserve money is now gone. In other words, most of the money that we could use for a one-time basis legally to cover our expenses that were appropriate for it have been used. And now we're kind of like on the equivalent of we live paycheck to paycheck. That's why we have to watch cash flow every day. We have to pull up electronically the bank statements every day to see what's clearing, what's there, what future claims that you're going to approve tonight. We had a spreadsheet today that we were looking at just to make sure that we would be able to pay for all the claims that you're going to approve tonight, along with payroll here in a couple of days.
Everybody totally understands that, right? Because I mean, it's like a punch in the mouth. You know, you don't want to get to the point where we're doing day to day, and we're there. It shouldn't be there, but we are, and so we got to try to fix it.
Yeah, I don't know how else to explain it other than cash is the lifeblood of this community. That's how you pay for things, that's how you do it. So the more we generate, the more we can use. The less we generate, the less we can use. And we just have to make sure that, you know, you can perform the governmental services that you promised the public you're going to perform, but yet not dig a hole to the point where you just can't afford to do that. And so, again, that's kind of where we're at. And this is going to be this way for a while. We have got to get a good handle on what's actually going to happen over the next year, which we think we have a good idea of what's going to happen, but you know, a one-time emergency or a one-time ice storm or there's a lot of things that throw kinks into the plans, and so we don't have a lot of room. We don't have a lot of wiggle room.
Well, I want to add to this. I mean, we're looking at month to month, but also you've gone out and incurred.
We can't hear you.
Oh,
Sorry about that. One thing that we're not looking, I mean, we're looking in the future. We've incurred debt with the water board, with the metering systems. We haven't started making payments on that. Where those monies are going to come from to make that payment has not been determined, or was it determined at the time the loan was taken? You've got over $2 million substation that you're going to enter into a loan agreement with OMPA to build. You're going to be making large payments on that. So you've got several large debts that I'm not sure where the money's going to come to make those payments. And that was one thing Frank asked is what funds were allocated to that debt service? And
typically what occurs in this world where you're borrowing money from OWRB or OMPA or whomever, if it's for utility system improvements, you typically then adjust the rates to generate that amount of revenue extra to make that debt service payment. I mean, you can't expect to just absorb $150,000 of new debt payments on top of everything else that you're doing without some additional supplement revenue-wise. And so the creditors who with your borrowing the money fully expect that you will sustain a rate structure sufficient enough to pay their debts back. And so again, I'm not being here in October when or whenever the debts were incurred. I don't know what the plan was, but I do know that you've got to make two $77,000 payments on that one debt, 2 in a year. So that's $144,000 that's going to have to come from somewhere, and I'm not sure where it's going to come from. But the most likely scenario is it comes from the utility fund. But if the utility fund doesn't have cash, what do you do? Well, if you don't make those debt payments, you'll find that your utility system becomes owned by someone else, the creditor, who will have no hesitation whatsoever of taking it over and raising the rates to whatever they need it to be to get their money back. But again, very extreme scenarios which don't occur very often. But that's why when you sign these debt agreements, you promise or pledge to them that you will maintain rates sufficient enough to satisfy the debt service. And so I assume that there might have been discussion at that point, that there should have been discussion at that point when you were incurring these debts for utility system improvements of how you were going to satisfy the debt service. If it wasn't, then that's a conversation you're going to have here.
Hate to pile on bad news, we owe $100,000 every year still on the REC building out here too. For another, I think,
4
4
years.
years.
27, that's
So.
2027.
Okay, well, it is what it is, we know.
Well,
Got
if that
questions?
form makes sense, we'll keep it coming. And then, as things occur, and, I think most of the time I don't even need to be here. This is gonna be pretty self-explanatory, but if I need to come back, I'll do that too. So just, let's see if this works for a while, and then we'll go from there.
Thank y'all for what y'all are doing. Just want to say that.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate it. I'm sorry we're in this situation, but, we'll get it all fixed.
Thank you. Let's see. Number 8, Lindsay Municipal Airport, discussing consideration of possible action to allow Mr. Robert Brooks to sponsor hold an event at the Lindsay Municipal Airport for Remote Control Club on October 6th through 9th, 2022 upon submittal of liability event policy.
I asked Mr. Brooks to be here to talk about what he has envisioned with the group, and when he's not here, I would take no action on this. This is an event that the city is not involved in. It's gonna take money, and until that person who wants to plan this event, I think, attends and explains and takes that responsibility, I think we table this until further.
Okay, we need a motion to table. All right,
Make the motion to table the event.
Second.
motion and second, roll call please.
Inman,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Drennan,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Staggs,
Yes.
Number 9, Aberdeen Enterprises LLC agreement, discussing consideration and possible action to enter into a collection agreement with Aberdeen Enterprises LLC for collection of outstanding obligations of court fines, costs, and fees.
Their agreement is in the packet, and it's a pretty basic agreement. They've entered into a lot of municipalities on the collection of uncollected, this is court. The Aberdeen and the RS2 are same company. The utilities just have stricter, more restringent debt collection abilities. So that had to be a different one according to the owner of Aberdeen. I highly recommend we start this. In the court fines that we have about $330,000 out there outstanding. So we can start pulling those. They will come down and train staff to how to pull those records and the kind of information they need in order to start that collection. Court is generally your first one that you start collecting with because they're easier debt. It's an easier debt to collect. It's not really a debt. It's a fine imposed on something. It's not like a utility account. So I recommend that we move to approve this agreement with Aberdeen on the court fines, costs, and fees.
Let me go ahead and read, because we got A and B together,
Okay.
right? B also states, I didn't finish it, I'm sorry, for collection of outstanding obligations of fire and ambulance runs. So it would be both those, if we approved A and B, that's under one agreement right there.
Yeah.
It's 2 agreements, isn't it?
It's.
Yeah, separate, but
Yeah.
I guess the way it's
So you
written, I think we could approve them. guess we do 9A and 9B if we need
Right.
to, but,
Yeah, I'd
Is that
approve
what
the
you do?
collection agreement separately.
okay. So we'll need to entertain a motion for A first, and then we'll, look at B.
Make a motion to approve 9A.
I second.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Staggs,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Drennan,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Inman,
Yes. Now, B, discussion, consideration, possible action to enter into collection agreement with Aberdeen Enterprises LLC for collection of outstanding obligations of fire and ambulance runs.
Make a motion to approve 9B.
Second.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Inman,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Drennan,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Staggs,
Yes.
I need to do 10 the same way, A and B separate.
Yes.
Okay. 10, ordinance 568, collection fees, discussion, consideration, possible action to approve ordinance number 568, collection fees, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Lindsay, Garvin County, state of Oklahoma, amending provisions, chapter 12, article 4, section 1295, to add a new subpart D, provide for a collection fee of 35% of the amount of any unpaid fines or costs if contracting with a collection agency, for the collection thereof, declaring an emergency. So basically, we're just tacking on that 35%, or they will be. We need a motion if you want to approve that.
Motion to approve 10A.
Need a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Staggs,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Drennan,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Inman,
Yes. Yeah, okay, now we need to vote separately on the emergency clause. Need a motion and a second. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt emergency clause of ordinance number 568.
Motion to approve 10B.
Second.
Motion second, roll call, please.
Inman,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Drennan,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Staggs,
Yes.
Number 11, ordinance number 569, collection fees. A, discussion, consideration, possible action to approve ordinance number 569, collection fees. An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Lindsay, Garvin County, state of Oklahoma, amending provisions of chapter 19 of the Lindsay Code entitled Water, Sewer, and Electric, Article 2, Rates and Charges by adopting section 1996, utility collection fee, provide for a collection fee of 35% of the amount of the unpaid fines or costs in contracting with a collection agency for the collection thereof, declaring an emergency. Need a motion to approve that if there's our discussion.
Make a motion to do 11A.
Motion is second.
Second.
Motion second. Need roll call, please.
Staggs,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Drennan,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Inman,
Yes. B, discussion, consideration, possible action to adopt emergency clause of ordinance number 569. Need a motion?
So moved.
Motion need a second.
Second.
Second, roll call, please.
Inman,
Yes?
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Drennan,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Staggs,
Yes.
Okay, executive session call, discussion, consideration, possible action to enter into executive session pursuant of 25 Oklahoma State Section 307D1, discuss the employment, hiring, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining or resignation of any individual, salaried public officer or employee, possible hiring of city manager Janice Kane. Need a motion?
I'll make a motion under executive session.
Motion need a second.
Second.
Second, roll call, please.
Staggs,
Yes.
Yes.
Brennan,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Inman.
Yes. Okay, we need a motion to reconvene from executive session.
You good, Darryl?
Correct.
So moved.
Second, roll call, please.
Inman,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Hernandez.
Here.
Staggs.
Yes.
14, discussion, consideration, possible action on any matters discussed in executive session on the hiring of a city manager. So we need to act on that hiring of a city manager. A motion,
Can I make the motion?
motion is second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Staggs,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
No.
Inman.
Yes. Governing board comments.
I don't know if I need to talk about it here, but I've talked to some people about possibly getting a committee together. Have some people come up with some ideas, kind of make it happen, maybe, it's kind of like what Robert's trying to do with sponsors. I think I would love to be able to see that come to action, kind of like an exploratory team. Like the whole fireworks situation, I thought that was really awesome, how you had citizens come together and do that.
Kevin's Grubs.
Yes, so if we could have like a make it happen committee, I think that'd be awesome. I'd like to try to possibly see that come to pass.
Okay. Any other comments? City manager comments?
I had some comments, but I think they're more for the public works.
Okay. Move to adjourn and go to the public works.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, or roll call, please.
Inman,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Staggs.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. All right, we're on. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'll figure out where I'm at here. Here we go. There we go. Gusher's gonna take care of it. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, call to order. Need a motion. Oh, I guess we're gonna call to order this week. And then roll call, please.
Inman,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Rowe,
Here.
Barker,
Here.
Jordan,
Here.
Hernandez,
Here.
Staggs.
Here.
Consent agenda. Anybody need to move anything or?
Make a motion to approve consent agenda as presented.
Okay,
Second.
roll call, please.
Staggs,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Inman.
Yes. Okay, let's see, where's that take us?
Number 5.
Yeah, we got number 5 right there. Discussion, consideration, possible action to enter into an agreement with RS2 Solutions LLC for collection of outstanding obligations for utility services.
I believe you were advised by Crawford that you have about $880,000 outstanding in utility bad debt. that we need to start searching, on utility accounts. Legally, we can go back 5 years. So we'll do our best and turn these over. Again, they will come down and train staff how to pull the reports and get the information to them, and we will do that on a monthly basis. So I recommend we approve that agreement.
Is Aberdeen and this company, did you say they were the same in one?
Yes, just because utility, yeah, they're affiliated.
Okay.
The utility side falls under the Fair Debt Collection Act. It's more like a credit card collection where your court is an offense.
Right.
And so it's a different type of approach.
One of the things I noticed in Aberdeen, I'm wondering if it's the same with these, is, if the debtor has suffered a hardship and a forgiveness or reduction is appropriate, or prorated reduction, would that be for them to decide the forgiveness,
I
can
think
you explain that just a little bit?
that would be determined as, we run those tax, or what we call 99 accounts, and move those into that collection. There may be instances where a hardship, and they may bring that to us if this person is struggling, or, you know, whatever the circumstances could be. They would need to be severe. That we could determine a different method of payment. Bring them in, we'll do a payment arrangement. You know, we'll do that. You are dealing with public funds. It's hard to say this person doesn't have to pay, but this one does.
Right.
So we work with them to do that, and we're doing the same with the current utility accounts that can't pay. If they're struggling, and I'll say that in my report about that.
You'll see in the contract, it does provide that it's gotta be approved by the LPWA.
Okay.
They're not gonna make that decision if we look under 4, it'll say, if the debtor is determined to have suffered a hardship and a forgiveness or reduction is appropriate, and a pro rata reduction is applied as approved by LPWA.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, did we?
Make a motion to approve the contract with RS2 Solutions LLC.
Second.
Motion second been made, roll call please.
Inman,
Yes?
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Brennan,
Yes.
Hernandez.
Yes.
Staggs.
yes,
6, trust manager, discussion, consideration, possible action to hire Janice Kane as Lindsay Public Works Authority trust manager. And we have to just do this for this kind of part of it.
Most of the cities and towns have a charter provision that provide that the city manager is also the trust manager, and or have other regulations that, and the Lindsay charter just doesn't provide that, because the trust authority actually was created after the charter was already enacted, and so that's the reason you need this separate fund.
I move should be approved. Need a second.
second,
Motion second, roll call please.
Staggs.
yes,
Hernandez.
Yes.
Brennan,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Miller,
No.
Inman.
Yes. Okay, governing board comments, anybody? Seeing none, city manager comments?
Regarding utilities, we are struggling to get utilities read and implemented, and getting that within that 30-day period. That takes all of the electric guys and Brandon's guys to go out and read meters. One of the struggles is turning back around, and all utilities do this. So what we will be doing, hopefully this month, if not next month, is to send out late notices with past due with the cutoff date on it. And that will give them their notice, and I need to get that out there to the public and talk about it and post it. One of the struggles we have in keeping meters read timely is now there's probably 200 to 225 accounts that we go back and do what they call door tags, saying we're gonna cut off your electricity, or whatever. And that is a time when they should be starting to read meters again. So it takes, you've got a whole crew of people trying to just monitor in those 200 accounts and going back again and hanging door tags. A lot of communities do it. I know REC, gas, whatever, they don't come knocking on your door and hanging tags. And we want to help anybody who is in that situation, because we do deferred payments. So that's a different approach we may be taking, just because of the amount of time the meter reading is taking us and keeping our guys from doing their other jobs. So if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll give you a heads up when we start that.
I think, and that's just kind of a question, but I think I'm right on this, when the new meters are in, which I know it's gonna be a while, but they will all that to be done, and then they can literally cut them off, or if that happened, or put them back on, basically,
Yeah,
from the
it'll be a
office.
switch in the office,
So it'll be
you're.
much quicker.
Speaking of meters, I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor. We are receiving weekly meter cans, so we're getting our goods. We have a pallet of meters, so that's a good sign. They indicated they were gonna start this in the last quarter of the year. So we're getting the goods where I think this will began and hopefully get accomplished. This is for water only. Electric will not start occurring until the first quarter in '23. That will be significant, but again, that's a big staff change, because you've got new software, you're gonna convert data, you've gotta make accuracy and readings to this program, to this. It's not gonna be easy, and training for the utility office personnel. So that will be a great thing for us. Meter accuracy will be read to the gallon, not for every 1,000 gallons. And that's where we saw the decline in readings and utility, is when that program just kind of went away and bit us. So, but that's a good sign. Got my first bill on it, $97,000. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Many times.
I can tell you a lot about meters, because I talked to a lot of people, but one of the major problems with Gophers would eat the lines. And I think they made 100% sure that the Gophers couldn't get to these lines and stuff, the water meters, but, so,
UTS is a corrective.
yeah. Any other comments or
No,
things? Okay. I guess entertain a motion to adjourn then.
Second. Much motion, yeah.
Roll call.
Inman,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Brennan,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Staggs.
Yes.
Whew.